First, I want to introduce Ribin LeClaire. She is president of Lampin Corporation in Uxbridge. This company is a maker of precision components for a number of industries. Ribin was one of the original employees of Lampin, which means she's been there for more than 30 years. She's done everything, and most recently has been named president of the corporation. Thank you. Chancellor Kumble Subbaswamy from UMass Amherst. He is a physicist by training, is the 30th chancellor at UMass Amherst. He is very highly regarded, very well known on campus, as he is known as Swami. Yes. And Rosalin Acosta is a veteran of the banking industry, and for the past year and a half has been Secretary of Labor and Workforce Development in Boston. She is also one of the most influential women in Boston as well. So thank you all for being here today. So, Ribin, let's start with you. I know that your company works with a lot of organizations in manufacturing and a lot of community colleges and higher education. So your employees get a chance to interact with these students. I know the students obviously get a lot out of it, but what do your employees get out of this arrangement?
Well, our employees go out to training, come back and see a different world out there. We have a lot of veteran employees and they have been there for a long time. But when they go out to training, they come back and they are just excited about what they've learned. They've seen a different environment. They come back and they bring their training to others. Lampin Corporation is a 35-person workforce, and we're all about teamwork. So we work as teams. So when someone comes out and goes out and does training with a company, or we send out people to do training in companies, we actually bring companies in to do training, and then they bring it to the team. So the more that they know on their machines, the better. So the training, we do training in-house, like I said, we do training outside, and we actually, when we bring employees in, we do a lot of training. So that's why we're working so hard with the schools and the actually high schools in the Blackstone Valley hub that they just put together. So that's where training comes from. But mostly, like I said, we are a team, so also the other employees train each other.
Right. And you and I were talking before the discussion this morning that it's not only important, I think a lot of companies will reach out to colleges, but you were saying it's important to reach kids younger and younger.
Yeah, and I believe in middle school they have to know that there's other jobs out there besides going to college. And I believe that really happens with the parents. The old way of thinking that manufacturing is a dirty job and it's just not for them. There's a lot of students that don't want to go to college, or can't afford, families can't afford to bring them to college. So we're actually out in the valley. We're going to different schools. We're going to high schools. We're going to middle schools, and we're bringing this to the schools and saying it. And when they come to Lampin, we'll pay for them to go to college. So it's if they want to go to college as an engineer, after they learn the machines, it's a win-win for all.
Chancellor, from a higher education perspective, I know that a lot of what goes on, especially with the younger generation, is it's all about experiences. We all went to school at a different time and age. It's completely different. What does higher ed and UMass Amherst specifically need to do to funnel a functional workforce in?
In the first place, let me say that Massachusetts is known as the education state. We're really fortunate to have in this state an incredible constellation of post-secondary institutions, all the way from vocational schools to community colleges and state colleges and the 5 wonderful campuses of the UMass system, and of course some of the best private schools in the planet. And so I think the fact that in this configuration still there is a gap between employees and employment really suggests that we're not fully leveraging those assets, and I think we're all engaged in trying to do better from that perspective. I think that, as you pointed out, Jeff, what has changed is that really employers now look for employees who are more job ready than when we started out, because it's a very competitive world and you can't spend 6 months training people unless you start when they're already in college or high school, as the case may be. So I think all of us are reconfiguring how we educate, and in fact, Northeastern was way ahead in terms of building co-ops into their programs and so on. So now I think you're beginning to see all institutions take internships and co-op and other experiential education very seriously. And in fact, our coming to Newton with the Mount Ida campus was our effort to both give more opportunities for our students to interact with employees in the area, particularly the Route 128 area, where in fact, we talked to the companies there, and they say, we're having trouble even getting internship candidates come to our area. And so they're really anxious to have us send more of our students in that area and so on. So I think that whether you're in communication, whether you're in manufacturing, whether you're in computer science, having that kind of experiential education is becoming more and more important. And I think we're all beginning to make that, building it into the curriculum, because again, affordability is an issue. Not everyone can afford to have unpaid internships during the summer. So one of the things that I think the employers need to be thinking about is, can they really begin to help support students who otherwise really would be working whatever employment they can get, rather than be preparing in a particular employment.
Right. Secretary, it's certainly no secret that the workforce is aging out here in Massachusetts. That's got to be one of the top concerns. How do we fix this? I mean, is there a fix?
Aside from birthing new people, I've already birthed 5. I've done my job. First of all, I just want to say, I'm really pleased to be here this morning among so many friends. I see peppered throughout the audience so many people I've worked with throughout the last few decades. So appreciate you all coming out so early this morning to talk about such an important thing. I'm going to get to your question in a little bit of a roundabout way. Not that I'm a politician, I'm just an appointee, but I'm going to sound like one just for 1 second. Rick talked a little bit about the economy, and I just want to also add that in spite of some of these labor shortages that we're seeing, and the fact that we are almost at full employment at 3.4%, it's still astonishing how many people we're adding to the labor force. So year over year, December over December, we added about 185,000 people to the labor force, which is the highest growth we've ever had since 1976. And we've added about $66,000 just this last year. 66,000 jobs just this year alone. So pretty amazing when you think about such a tight labor market. Those are numbers you normally see coming out of a recession, and we're certainly not in that place. So with that said, I mean, what are some of the things that we're doing? Yes, we have an aging population, and a chart that we use often in our office, which is very disturbing, is that the young population, those under the age of 19, has absolutely flattened. So you imagine that chart, absolutely flattened, but the aging population has grown. So there's a huge gap there, and that's what you're feeling and will continue to feel. Where are we going to get all the people? And then it's not just about getting the people, but it's getting the right people with the right skills. And that's what Ribin and Chancellor have been talking about, is making sure that we start really, really early in those pathways to make sure that we're really focusing on the industries that matter. And over this past year and a half, we've spent a lot of time doing some regional planning throughout the Commonwealth to try to really understand what are the growth industries that we have in the Commonwealth. And what bubbled to the top for all of our industries, for all our regions, Berkshire to the Cape, were manufacturing, healthcare, and IT were the 3 priority industries that we all have to work on. Fortunately, and I really want to underscore, fortunately, we live in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and this state gets it. If our country were run the way that Massachusetts were run, we'd all be in a better place. And I say that because our cabinet works very, very collaboratively. Our cabinet works together the way that all government administrations should work. So every single month I sit together with Secretary Keneally, Housing and Economic Development, Secretary Pizer, Executive Office of Education, and myself and our teams to make sure that we're aligning all our grants and aligning all our goals. Because if we're not aligned, then we're all working in silos, and we don't do that in this governor's administration. So the fact that this panel here represents education, business, and workforce and government is exactly how we work and how we think about everything that we do. So this gap and this aging workforce that we have, I believe Rick talked about, embracing immigration and also getting people out of the sidelines that have been either underemployed or unemployed for too long. So we have a lot of programs right now that we're working on to make sure that folks that have been sidelined because they've either been on public benefits for too long and they are afraid of jumping back into the workforce because of what's called the cliff effect. If they make a certain amount of money, they make too much money, then they lose their benefits, and then the delta isn't enough to pay for childcare. Any one of us here that have children, you know that childcare is not cheap in the state. So, what are some of the wraparound services that we can give folks to help them? And then also we have our Latino and our Black population, which is absolutely growing. The demographics of the state are growing quickly. And employers have to make sure that you're grasping that, because if we're not doing more to make sure that we're increasing the diversity in our companies, at the end of the day, the profitability of your company will suffer. So from a government perspective, I know I can't do any of this work by myself. I need the employers at the table. I need education. As you heard, I've been in private sector for 32 years. This is my first government banking job, my first government job. So I would not be able to do this without the help of the employers that we have around the table. And I'll talk a little bit more about specifically what we're doing as we move on.
So I don't want to get too sidetracked, but I think this is important to bring up at this point because of the people who are working in a number of industries, almost all of them, many are concerned about a robot taking their jobs, right? Okay, so I guess the question is are we seeing that? Is this a real problem? What are we doing about getting the workforce to be able to exist with these machines? I guess I'll open it to everyone. Robin, why don't you start?
We actually are buying new equipment, and with our new equipment, we are having the equipment able to have robotics. We don't really have anyone in the shop at this time to run those machines, but that's one of the things we look at every day. We look at, I look at a machine on a floor and I say, wow, will that eliminate a person? I don't think it's going to eliminate the person, but the person's going to have to be trained to be able to take care of or learn how to use that robotic machinery, or in the biggest part is how to repair that robotic. So that's a huge industry, which I am trying to have the chamber and look at that and say, what can we do for these people in colleges and even in high school? What are you doing to have this kind of industry that would help us? Because we don't have it yet. But a lot of companies are going that way. And it's a wonderful invention, but still need people. I don't think it's going to replace people at all.
Right. Chancellor, does that change the way you train students?
I mean, certainly we've always talked about lifelong learning being important, but it was sort of abstract. But now it's no longer abstract in that people change jobs so many times, and the upskilling and reskilling is terribly important. So I think that what you're beginning to see is not only building that foundation that communication skills, critical thinking skills, and so forth that are so essential for all the jobs. But on top of that, I think you do need institutions to be able to provide different skills, different learning. For example, you may need a certificate in cybersecurity, you may need a certificate in robotics or what have you. Those kinds of things, I think, is what you will need to do throughout the life. And so, for example, we have had an old program called University Without Walls, which used to be just sort of a continuing education or a degree completion program. We're taking that concept and building it into a concept which we call University Without Walls and Clocks, so that you really you're never out of touch with UMass or whatever the institution may be, and come in and out of, whether it's through the cloud or face-to-face, you're always able to get the education you need or the additional training that you need in order to stay current in an employment market that changes constantly. So I think that what you will see is high quality, quality guaranteed, because I think there are a lot of institutions that provide, they claim to provide this kind of a continuing education that are suspect. We've seen that. But I think that high quality institutions will then begin to guarantee quality and provide this lifelong learning. And I think collaboration with industry is really critical for this. And in fact, again, there are really good examples. For 50 years now, Raytheon and UMass Amherst have had a program in which Raytheon employees have gotten master's degrees in radar engineering, and, from UMass, and it's set up in a way where they don't have to be away from work for too long and things like that. For 50 years that has gone on. But now increasingly, you're beginning to see those kinds of interactions. There's a program called ICONS, an undergraduate program, which is an interdisciplinary, real-life, case studies based, team-based learning environment that's supported by Waters Corporation, that's supported by Annika Pharmaceuticals, and so on. So, setting up programs that prepare students to work in real-life environments is an important part of, again, making people able to work in a job environment that constantly shifts.
Yeah. And Secretary, if we just take an Economics 101 course briefly here, okay, so if you're going to invest in technology, it's because from a business perspective you want to lower your costs. But as Ribin says, you're going to need to have the workers trained.
Yep.
So I think the myth out there, maybe it's a myth, maybe it's not, maybe you can answer this. Doesn't that lower employer costs for people overall? Do you know what I'm getting at? Where you have the machines to lower the cost of the people, and then the people who have to service them, lower pay for them.
So look, there is no doubt. And when we talk, we spend a lot of time talking about the future of work. We spend a ton of time talking about the robots. So they're all going to come into this room and take you all away, and there'll be nobody here to talk to. The truth of the matter is, and if you look at McKinsey reports, I mean, there are a lot of reports out there on what robotics are going to do to the workforce. The prediction is that by 2030, 73% of retail jobs will be automated. Those are real jobs, right, that will be gone. And if you talk about automated vehicles, right, and you talk about all the taxi drivers that are out there, all the Uber drivers, the Lyft drivers, the bus drivers, what's going to happen to that industry? What's going to happen to the people that are doing those jobs? So without a doubt, we're in a revolution, a technology revolution here. There is no doubt that something is happening. What we have to do and what we have to make sure that we're prepared for is how do we catch the people coming off these jobs, making sure that we can reskill them to something else, something that is an industry that is a prevalent industry here in the Commonwealth. Chancellor spoke about lifelong learning. That is where we are today. I mean, the degree that got you where you are, half a century ago or a quarter century ago may not be the skills that you need now. So the governor last year signed an executive order to start the Digital Innovation and Lifelong Learning Commission. Commission's work is done and recommendations are now in, and they're on the governor's desk right now. But without a doubt, we need to focus on being a lot more nimble, making sure that our educational systems can meet the demands of the employer. Skills. So we're talking a lot more about skills now than we are about diplomas and degrees. And what's really still a little bit of an unknown is what exactly are the skills that are going to be needed for this future world. So we still know that collaboration and teamwork and all those things are really important. But what are some of those hard skills that are needed? Maybe Chancellor, you've done some work there for this future, for the future worker, because that's really what we have to focus on. A lot of the jobs that we're seeing today don't require necessarily a 4-year degree, but they do require a high school degree plus something, some kind of certification. So we're really focused right now also on apprenticeship programs and making sure that we're preparing people for the workforce and having the employer have the ability to train folks. And this is a model, obviously, that's been used in Germany and Switzerland for 100 years, and we're just kind of waking up to it a little bit in America. So we established our first registered apprenticeship program for IT about 2 months ago. And if anyone is looking for web developers or folks in cyber as an employer, or if you're a job seeker, you should go to apprenti.org. And they're our partner in this venture. And basically, we put folks through about 14 weeks of classroom training, Apprenti does, along with training institutions around the Commonwealth, and some of them are colleges. And then they work on the job. They work for about a year with an employer. Now, we won't do this. We won't put a cohort of students through this program unless we have an employer on the other side saying, we're committed to hiring 5 of those people or 3 of those people. So the more employers we have at the table that need IT workers, the bigger our classes will be. So right now we've got about 85 that have applied and are ready to go. And we've got folks like Wayfair, Partners Healthcare, and several others that have joined us in this venture to hire these students. We're going to do the same thing in healthcare, and we're going to do the same thing in manufacturing. Because, as I said, those are the 3 priority industries that we're really focused on right now. And we're standing up a healthcare collaborative. We're launching that next week with the governor, with CEOs around the Commonwealth to really talk about and tackle what are some of the bottlenecks in the workforce, the healthcare workforce, and what are some of the things that we need to do to change, whether it's educational changes, whether it's certification changes, some of the licensing challenges that we have. What are some of the things that we could do to make sure that we loosen the pipeline for those healthcare workers? Because if we don't do anything about the healthcare shortage, we'll have about 43,000 jobs that we can't fill in the next 5 years. That's a lot of jobs.
I want to add something to that. I think that there's still in our society a stigma for students not going to college and going to vocational school. And I think part of what we have to do here is to remove that stigma by making this seem as a continuum where you're in and out. You can go work, study for a while, work for a while, come back if you're advancing in your career, and then go back into the workforce in a different way, come back, and so forth. So Great Britain has an example of this, building on the apprentice system, but you really never really thinking about simply I'll stop at vocational education, or I'll stop at community college, associate's education, and so on. So this idea of really a seamless collaboration between vocational schools, community colleges, and 4-year institutions is really, I think, one of the ways to get more people who would otherwise be thinking about college as the only thing they would do into this stream. And we have a pilot project that we've been trying to get funded through collaboration between industry and the state, and we'll continue to work that way.
Okay. I do want to open it up to questions in just a couple of minutes, but I do have a couple more questions for the panel. Robin, two-part question. Is it more difficult today to find a skilled workforce for you? And you're a relatively small company. Does that help or hurt your prospects?
I actually think it helps because we're so small, we don't need that many employees, but it's hard to find skilled employees. So it's not difficult to bring other people in that are not skilled, but if they have, good work ethics, if they have good soft skills, if they have, we're more than willing to train. So we bring these people in, and maybe we start them at a lower level, and then then we train them, and we have done that in many cases at Lampin. We have people that have started coming in from high school, employees who just went to high school, didn't want to go to college, came in, just did cleaning parts. Now this guy runs his whole department, runs the CNCs, does it all. We've sent him to school, everything. He's making really good money now, and that's how we actually have been able to keep our workflow going and our employees going. We don't, it's been hard to find qualified CNC machinists. And we have an aging workforce. Our workforce, most of the people that work for me right now have been there over 10 years, and they're over 40, so, or over 50. So that, we need to bring younger students in, bring them in, start them to work, get them trained, and keep the company moving. But it hasn't been that difficult this time of year, but it was years ago.
Right.
But we've decided to change how we're going to hire, because if we go out there and just look for CNC machinists, you're not going to find them. And if you do find them, they're just coming in from another place that they worked, and they're not that young, and then they go to the next place who's going to give them the most money. So
That's another challenge.
it
right?
is, yeah.
Okay, so we've all agreed that school today, higher education, is much different than it was when we all took that route. But Chancellor, if you look into your crystal ball, what is the relationship? I mean, right now you pay your tuition, you go to school, and we've already seen in the video some of the evolvement of that process. But 5-10 years down the road, what is higher education, especially for the UMass system, going to look like?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of hinted at, the evolution, and I think that it'll no longer, I mean, already the way you really achieve credentials is not like we all did, which is 120 credits warming a seat somewhere. and that has changed into micro-credentials that, edX and others have, for example, put forward. And you have online, you have SNHU, Southern New Hampshire University, for example, does that entirely online and at a cost that is more affordable, but in certain areas. So I think what we're seeing is an evolution where, again, as I said, quality is going to be a serious concern, because anything costs money, and we've seen a lot of private entities that are online offers who really promise a great deal and not deliver in terms of both the training and the jobs, and so you have to be careful. But I think universities that have great reputation and are known for quality are entering into this field now of really being your partner for life, or a broker for life, if you will, in training and retraining and upskilling. And I think that's really the evolution. And over the next 10 years, certainly, I mean, UMass Online has existed and has a great name already. So building on and around that, you'll see universities like the UMass system and others as well really go into a lifelong partnership. You come in at age 17 and you stay with us until through retirement, where learning in retirement is also something you would do with us, whether it's online, whether it's face-to-face, or in a mall near you or something like that. So.